Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are back in Isaiah and we are in chapters 44 through 48, I believe, yes. And today it's a little bit of a lengthy reading. However, there are some pretty common themes that we were picking up throughout this reading. This is again continuing on into more of that poetic nature of Isaiah. But very, very prophetic still. So one common theme that I picked up on over and over again, I kind of referred to it earlier as God's Charlie Brown moment, where he literally, it seems like he's calling out the Israelites and just being like, you are just a bunch of blockheads, because more reasons.
So the Charlie Brown
one.
connection is the blockhead. That's
correct.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
I got him there.
So God is calling out idols so much in these chapters. We see it a lot, specifically in chapter 44, as well as, wait for it, 45. Actually, even 46. There's a lot to be said about idols throughout this whole thing. But there is one specific moment that I was just like, dang, he's just going after it. In chapter 44, verses, let's see, 44 verses 14, pretty much till verse 17. It's basically making fun of anyone who was putting an idol in God's place. So there's this example of a man who is making food for himself that uses the wood that was grown from the ground. He takes a piece of wood, the same wood that he burns in order to warm his food, he warms himself with, and then what's left over, he carves and makes an image or makes an idol that just sits around that he worships. So the irony is
it actually says that he bows down to.
Yes, and it's the irony is that the same thing that you use to heat your food with, to warm yourself with, you're also going to worship, that grew out of the ground. How did it grow? Who allowed that to grow for you to make into? So it's hilarious.
Well, it's told in story form. God enables a tree to grow and waters a tree and it grows.
Mm-hmm.
And a man cuts it down and heats his house and cooks his food and falls on his face before the idol.
I forgot the best part.
Yeah.
The end of verse 19 in chapter 44 says, "Shall I fall down before a block of wood?" That was the part that got me. I'm like, shoot, that just puts it into such silly perspective, how ridiculous this was.
So I was reading that and I was I was definitely drawn into the way that it's told in a narrative way. I just resonate with that. I think it's clever. Mm-hmm. And it's oh, well, it's really good that we're not as silly anymore. And I was like, shoot, they make money out of paper that comes from trees.
Uh-huh.
And definitely we worship money from time to time to time. I don't know if we bowed down before it, although sometimes you may bow down to ask for more of it.
Yeah.
Just kind of interesting. So I think it's applicable to us today.
Well, then we move into chapter 46 as well. And this is referring to the idols of Babylon versus the one true God.
Yep.
And then in verse 7 it says, this is referring to how men, I guess, how they move idols around and how ridiculous it is that they have to basically do things for it. So the verse says, they lift it to their shoulders, they carry it, they set it in its place, and it stands there. It cannot move from its place. If one cries to it, it does not answer or save him from his troubles. I think it's just really putting into perspective just how stupid it was that so many of them had fallen into idol worship. And God's just how dare you? How foolish and how juvenile to just carry around pieces of wood or metal images or whatever it was. You're the one doing all the steps for it. It's this weird made up thing in your head.
It's kind of silly.
And honestly, I think it's kind of it's just really, what's the word I want? It's disrespectful. God's just what are you doing?
I made that tree.
Yeah.
I allowed it to grow. I let the seed be planted. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? I sustained you as you heated your house and ate your food.
Yep, exactly. So you noticed something interesting about chapter 45, though.
I enjoy being a Bible nerd. I enjoy learning facts about the Bible. It is always faith affirming to me. You guys that have been listening to the podcast for a while, you're not surprised by that. Isaiah 45, we were reading over it, and I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him and to loose the belts of kings. Uh, there's several interesting things about that line. The first thing is Cyrus was not even a thought during Isaiah's time. Cyrus was the king of the Medes and Persians, and he would have come on the scene about 150 years after Isaiah. So as we're reading over it, I'm like, wait a minute, how does Isaiah know Cyrus's name? And so what we have here is Isaiah not only predicting that the Israelites, the people of Judah, will be able to return to their homeland in the reign of Cyrus. He's predicting that they'll return. He's predicting that a new kingdom will be on the scene. And he's predicting that the king of that kingdom will be named Cyrus. This is pretty incredible. And it's so incredible, in fact, that a lot of people have a problem with the text. A lot of people look at this text and they say, hey, it is not possible that Isaiah could know the name of Cyrus. And so this is probably a second Isaiah, like another author from the Babylonian exile that was inserted his writings into Isaiah's writings. So the first hilarious thing about that is if you are a Christian and you believe that God created the world from nothing, and you believe that Isaiah can predict the Messiah, you believe like all the things in the Bible, why is it that it is shocking to us that Isaiah would know the name of Cyrus? Keep in mind, this is somebody who's like parents don't even exist yet, their grandparents don't even exist yet, and Isaiah's calling out exactly what's going to happen. And so I mean, believing, especially if you're a Christian, that this is made up or contributed by a second author is just kind of silly. Because we already believe so many fantastical things, so many incredible things of God. It's weird that it makes us uncomfortable that Isaiah knows a name.
Well, he's also mentioned again in 48.
Yep.
I don't even think we looked at, or did you look at this already? Where
Yep,
it's like talking in verse 14 and 15, it's basically calling out to Israel saying, hey, like the Lord loves him, meaning Cyrus. And he's going to perform his purpose through him. He says, even I have spoken and called him. I have brought him, and he will prosper in his way. Basically affirming, like, God's going to do what God's going to do, regardless of the person, because of the disobedience of the nation.
And Cyrus was a real king. Cyrus did, in fact, write an edict that allowed the Israelites to return home. One of the hallmarks of Cyrus's reign is that he wanted to be more honoring of all gods. And so he allowed all the people who had been captured by the Babylonians to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples to all their gods. So Cyrus allowed the Israelites to come back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. He also allowed many other groups of people to return to their other religions in other places. A lot of people believe that is one of the reasons that Cyrus was able to reign successfully over most of the earth. We'll talk about Cyrus some more in the future because he is a big part of just Christian history. But there is this thing called the Cyrus cylinder that was discovered in...
What is it with all these shapes?
Yeah, it is.
For
They like
cylinders.
Yeah. This was discovered in 1879, and it was like an edict, a declaration that would have been put in the cornerstone of a building, similar to like those time capsules that go into those dates in the cornerstone. And it is an account of Cyrus as king, and it's also an account of him allowing people to return to their homelands. And so what the Bible says about Cyrus lines up with what history says about Cyrus. This is just, I don't know, very sharp instance, at least number 3 of Isaiah correlating directly with a piece of actual history that has been discovered. And I believe the Bible is actual history. Don't hold that against me. But the Cyrus cylinder is a pretty big deal.
Well, I think something to kind of like wrap this part of this whole Cyrus talk and all these things, to wrap all that up. If we look at chapter 48, the tail end of our reading today, in verses 18 to 19, it's basically, well, actually 17 to 19, it's basically like the Lord's calling out to them saying like, hey, I'm the one who's going to lead you the way that you should go. And I wish, verse 18 is where I'm going next, I wish that you would have paid attention to the commandments, or, oh, how that you had paid attention to the commandments. Your peace would have been like a river righteousness like waves of the sea. Your offspring would have been like the sand, and your descendants like the grains, like its grains, and their name would never be cut off or destroyed. So it's kind of crazy because it's like God's like he's laying out the plan of what's going to happen to them. He's laying out their foolishness, and he's like, hey, like I've been pretty clear, and if you would have just listened, your peace would have been like the river. Like there's so many things that would have just been so much better. I think that's a reminder to us though too, because we can fall into the same exact things, and I know for myself that happens all the time. Like there are so many things I regret because it's like, wow, this is set out so plainly for me, and I still somehow manage to always go astray or find a different way or find my own way. How many times have you been told that?
Yeah.
But we would have never been cut off if we would have just been obedient. But it's a reminder to us to continue to, I think for even your part today, to just like reorient yourself in whatever situation you're in, because there's more than likely you are either led astray or beginning to be led astray or tempted to be led astray. Just remember that like the Lord lays it out plainly to you. His word is living and active, and it is a good way to keep us like totally like focused on him and his plans for us. That hopefully his peace will be like a river in our lives, that his righteousness will be like, or our righteousness will be like waves in the sea, and that we can never be cut off from him because of the sin and wrong choices that we make. I mean, obviously that's inevitable, but we want to try to stay as close to it as we possibly can. But anyway, do you want to add anything to that?
It's fantastic. We'll be back again tomorrow. See you then.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.